Hello there, and welcome along to episode 17 of season 2 of the Gardener Ben podcast. As you might be able to hear from my voice, I'm struggling just a little bit. The last few weeks' schedule have really started to take their toll, and I don't think I've ever done so much talking in quite so much time. The garden here at North Lodge is looking absolutely stunning. However, we have received some strong wind and driving rain, which unfortunately has spoilt a lot of the first flush of flowers. However, there's plenty more to come where that came from, so I'm not going to be despondent. Instead, I'm going to be heading out into the garden with my fruit-nosed pruners, my secateurs in hand and my large dead-heading bucket, and I'm going to remove any spoilt flowers. If your flowers do tend to get a little bit ruined and you end up with a little bit of balling, don't be afraid to just simply remove them. And this week on my social media channels, I've been talking about the subject of deadheading and how and why we remove spent flowers to keep the hormone levels in the plants high and keep them in a state of flowering for just as long as possible. And now that we're seeing our first proper flush of flowers, if you intend to liquid feed your plants, now is the time to start doing it. Liquid and foliar feeds can be applied every 2 weeks for the rest of the growing season. So whether you're growing in the ground or growing in a pot, this is the only time that you should get your plants wet, and they should be applied every fortnight. The garden is simply teeming with life, with our family of robins now hatching their second brood of chicks for the season. Our family of wrens have fledged their first batch and have moved on to nest number 2. I was even this week incredibly lucky to have a very close and personal encounter with a juvenile greater spotted woodpecker, which unfortunately had fledged the nest and run into problems with a large group of crows, who were giving it some serious hassle in the cutting and vegetable garden. Luckily, I was out in the garden early to find out what the noise was and found it on the floor underneath the sweet peas. The woodpeckers often visit the garden, especially at this time of year, when they bring their young to have a look at our olive trees, which make great points of training for forage. One of our ancient trees is actually slowly rotting out from the inside, and I'm assuming makes a great point of training to look for grubs and things lurking below the surface. Its parents had unfortunately abandoned it and left it to its own devices, and the crows were really giving it a hard time. I left it there for some time after scaring off the crows, but unfortunately its parents didn't return and it seemed unable to fly on its own, whether it was tired or simply too scared. So it's gone off to an animal rescue centre where it will be rehabilitated before being re-released. Now we've had a little bit of rain, you can certainly see that everything has been poised for a large growth spurt. The weeds in the garden have really got out of hand again, and the bindweed is causing me no end of trouble. So after recording today's episode, I'm off to the winter garden, which was newly planted several months ago, to actually give it a thoroughly good go through. The area contains some roses that I'm due to review this year, and some of them are absolutely swamped in bindweed, so it's a job that I mustn't put off any further. The tiny amount of rain that we've had was just enough to keep the lawn moving for the next few weeks. I don't know what you're doing in your garden, but my lawn was just about to go brown as a piece of toast, and I stopped mowing it around 3 weeks ago, as it was looking like it was in serious amounts of stress. Our large willow tree, which makes up a huge feature point of our garden as well, is shedding vast quantities of leaves all over the garden, as it struggles to obtain the moisture it's needed. We are now here on the south coast of England officially in a state of drought, having not received any substantial rainfall for some time, which is really very worrying indeed. My large water tanks are completely empty and I'm relying on the hose for as long as possible. But our changing weather conditions make gardening ever so challengeable. Things like the dahlias had an amazing start to the season, but have all but stopped growing now as it's been so hot they can't really keep up with the amount of moisture they need to take up to put on large amounts of growth. So I'm expecting these to produce short and stumpy stems for the weeks and months ahead. My poor and beloved tree ferns have also had a really rough season of it so far. As you might remember, the squirrel took a liking to it several weeks ago and ate several of the fronds as they started to emerge, and the recent squally and blustery winds that we've had unfortunately broke off another half a dozen of its beautiful soft fronds, which are particularly delicate as they start to unravel, and they were particularly large, so that was quite upsetting. It just goes to show that you're never really sure what the weather is going to do or what Mother Nature is going to throw at you next. And as a gardener, you have to continue to change, adapt and react to the situations you find yourselves in. Before we commence National Rose Month 2025 and the enormous body of work I've been working on behind the scenes, which see me in front of nearly 70 different rose varieties this year, I'm concluding my peony review season on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok, and all the videos will be available for you to watch over the next few days. Mark and I are going to be taking a little bit of time out this weekend and heading off to the Show Gardens and Garden Centre at Peterbilt's. Now, unfortunately, this is a 3.5-hour drive for us, so we're loading the dog into the car. We've booked ourselves a cheap hotel and we're looking forward to eating at the Rosarian restaurant when we make our visit over the weekend. So look out for loads of content coming from the gardens over the next few days. This week, the podcast once again heads to the other side of the Atlantic, where I get to talk to Kristine from Santa Cruz Dahlias, one of my favourite online accounts. Kristine and her husband are dahlia hybridisers and have even written 2 books on the subject, which are available for you to purchase on Amazon. One is called Dahlias Seed to Bloom, and the other one is called Dahlia Breeding. So if you're interested in hybridising and producing varieties all by yourself at home, these are must-reads. Kristine is absolutely dahlia crazy and could talk on the subject for ages, and it was so lovely to hear her passion for the subject shine through during our conversation. Well, on today's episode of the Gardener Ben podcast, we have winged our way all the way across the Atlantic Sea, and I have the pleasure in talking to Kristine from Santa Cruz Dahlias. Welcome along to the podcast. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on. I love talking about dahlias, so this is going to be fun.
No, honestly, it is my pleasure. I am a huge fan of your dahlias. I'm a huge fan of your account, and I have several of your dahlias that you've actually bred in my garden, which I absolutely adore. So, yeah, tell the listeners that may not be aware of who and what you do a little bit about what it is that you're doing.
Okay. Well, I am a dahlia farmer and a dahlia hybridiser. I live in Santa Cruz, California, which is kind of about 60 minutes south of San Francisco, and we're right along the Pacific Ocean. So our farm is about a quarter of a mile from the ocean, and we grow about 3,000 dahlias in that area, that spot, and I just really love growing dahlias, so I've been doing it for about 20 years, and that's kind of it in a nutshell. We've also written 2 books. My husband is a great writer, and he and I teamed up and wrote 2 books. So we have one on dahlia breeding. So if you're interested in hybridizing, you can get that, and it's specific on that. And then we also wrote a general how to grow dahlias, and it's called Dahlia Seed to Bloom. So we've written books. I hybridize mostly. I do sell to florists and designers, pretty much starting right around Mother's Day. We sold just a couple tubs. Maybe we had about 100 blooms around Mother's Day. So sometimes we get our dahlias in the ground really early so that we can have early blooms. And I really enjoy having blooms as soon as possible. And here in California, our last frost date is April 15th, so we don't have to worry too much about the plants getting frosted, although I do protect them sometimes with a row cover called Agribond, which is keeps it a little bit warmer under there if we are going to have a frost.
Okay, good.
So
So you're obviously quite bold, because you said your last frost date's normally about the 15th of April, but you did actually bed some cuttings out on the 1st of March this year, but they were protected under fleece, were they, for a while?
yeah, they were. Yeah, I keep them under fleece for like a good, I don't know, month or so until they're pushing up against it, and then I let them free after that
You've got
because
no
it
choice.
really protects. Yeah, it protects them from the early bugs too, like aphids and thrips that tend to come in kind of early. So it's kind of works like triple duty or double duty, at least for me. And I've even started dahlias even earlier, like in February, but that's extra work because if we do get a frost, I have to like double fleece them. And that's,
I'm
every
always
night out there with the.
I'm always telling my followers that you're sometimes less a bit better being a little bit late to the party than you are being early and then having to sort of shuffle things about and cover them up and bring them in or protect them in some way. So they always get here in the UK the dahlia following is really building. The dahlias are very much on trend at the moment, which I'm very happy about. I've been a lover of the dahlia for a long time, and for me, as you know from my account, it's mainly roses that I grow, but I have my big five, as I call them. And the dahlia is a way of really elongating the opulence of the season right into the very, very back end of the season. Now, you said a second ago your last frost date for sort of bedding out is the 15th of April, which is really, really early. When would your season normally finish for you? Is it nice and long?
It is super long here because we can sometimes not get our first frost until like February or January sometimes.
Okay,
So
yeah.
if you wanted to keep your dahlias going, we have members of our Dahlia Society that bring in blooms in December sometimes. I
Wow.
don't typically keep mine going that long. I want to get my tubers out of the ground and get them stored away for the winter so that I'm not dividing my tubers in the middle of a rainstorm or something like that. So
Hmm.
I usually tend to get them out in late September, October, November, somewhere around there. I usually try to get mine out, but you could have the season go quite long here. Dahlias tend to go down to powdery mildew no matter how well you take care of them. And so, that's always an issue for keeping them going,
I can
a
imagine.
super long time.
I can imagine with the growing season that long. I mean, even if you keep them well fed and well watered, that they're just exhausted, aren't they, by the time they've been in the ground and flowering for that sort of period of time. That's a long time to keep them going.
Yeah, it really is. Their peak season is here, in August. So, they're kind of going downhill from there. And the light gets such that the centers pop really easily and, the petal count goes way down. And so they're not really as high quality as you'd want them to be, keeping them that long into
Yeah.
the season.
See, our season here in the UK, we'd be very, very lucky to get a bloom before August. I mean, that mine, I overwinter many of mine in the ground. I don't tend to lift them, obviously, because I'm not selling and dividing. So the bulk of my collection stays in the ground. I mulch over the top of them, and then the new varieties, for instance, that I buy from a local stockist who actually supplies some of the dahlias that you've bred, Gilbert's dahlias. I obviously buy brand new varieties and add them to my collection. So any that I lose over the winter. I just replace them with a new variety. But yeah, we'll be very lucky here in the UK to get a flower at all until the 1st of August. My tubers in the ground are literally only just emerging, and it's been very, very warm over here for the last couple of weeks. So they're about 2 weeks ahead of schedule. But ones I grew on in the greenhouse, they'll be bedded out this week, and they're about sort of foot 18 inches high. But you're several weeks or even several months ahead of us.
Yeah, so we have our Dahlia shows. So I also show my Dahlias at Dahlia shows. We have like three of them in California or
Hmm.
four of them in California. So on all those shows are in August. So everybody's pretty much peak season in August.
Okay, yeah. Now,
Yeah. So yeah.
there's several absolutely beautiful dahlias that you are responsible for. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you're looking for when you're cross hybridizing and developing a new dahlia. What particularly stands out to yourself?
Yeah, what I really enjoy doing is bringing new colors of dahlias into the world, and especially ones that florists and designers are interested in working with. So the colors that they haven't seen yet in dahlias. So much of the dahlia hybridizing prior to like the last 5 years was done by dahlia societies, and those colors. I don't know if you're familiar with. Showing dahlias? Do you show your dahlias?
I've always promised myself I was going to, and I never got round to doing it. I've been too scared.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is kind of scary because there's so many really strict rules on showing dahlias, at least here, and I'm sure in the UK it's the same way. But the color is really particularly kind of strict on the colors. The colors have to be pure colors, and
Hmm.
so the sort of the complex colors, the muted colors, the dusty colors, or antique colors, anything like that would be severely docked, or people would say that is not a good dahlia for a show. So those colors haven't really been hybridized for ever, really,
Yeah.
here in the U.S.
which
So
which is obviously
so
completely
that's
opposite to sort of floral trends. I mean, everything is going sort of dusty and muted and well, yeah. I mean, the floral market is leaning that way, isn't it? So I suppose, yeah, the primary colours. Not many want. I don't know many brides that would want to walk down the aisle with a bright yellow bouquet of dahlias.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I thought, well, there's a need for it, and I was selling to my local. I have about 5 local florists that I sell to, and they're like, that highlighter yellow. We'll take like one of those, but the colors we need are like peaches. We need things that can blend because we're
Hmm.
putting together a lot of flowers for our bridal bouquets and for the arrangements that we work with. And so what I feel really lucky is my florists actually come to my farm and pick up their blooms at my farm. And so I'm like, hey, can you guys have a minute? Can you walk through my seedling patch and tell me, what colors you guys
Which ones
see
stand
out
out?
there that
Yeah.
you need? Yeah, which stand out. And so I've been super lucky. Like Kay's Mocha Katie, it was a florist, is a florist here in our town. And I took her through and she goes, oh, that one there, you need to keep that one. It'll blend with so many different things. And I'm like, really? Because I had come from the show flower side. And so it took me actually a little bit to realize, like, okay, these are the colors that florists and designers are looking for, those dusty antique kind of colors. And also for brides and things, sometimes they want just white, but a lot of times they want ones that have blushes in them as well. So I feel really lucky that I've got a great group of people that kind of help me along really with my hybridizing, encourage me to hybridize certain colors that are needed out there in the industry. So I've been doing that for a while. I actually have been hybridizing since like 2012.
Okay.
And it took me a while to kind of learn how to hybridize and how to do especially hand hybridizing hand crossing, because it wasn't really done very much at all, the hand crossing, and there wasn't any like book out there that you could just read and learn how to do it. And so that was something when COVID hit, all the shows were canceled, and I said, wow, we might have time to like write a dahlia breeding book, because we have time right now, and my husband's a really good writer, so I'm like, let's just do it. And so we sat down and did that. So because it was kind of frustrating for me at the beginning. There wasn't a lot of information. People were kind of secretive about how it was done, and so I felt like if I could share this with people, then they wouldn't have to go through all those years of trial and error that I had to go through to start hybridizing dahlias. Because really, hybridizing dahlias is a numbers game. So the
Yes.
more people that are out there hybridizing, the more likely we are to get a significant amount of new dahlias. Because, like, for example, I plant like 1,000 dahlia seedlings a year, and after 2 years, I've only kept 5 of those. So, you can see that you have to rogue out or throw out so many of your seedlings that you're growing because they don't pass the test. One, either color, form, petal count, plant health and vigor, tuber production. There's so many traits that they have to kind of click off in order to be really a good one that should go into production.
Yeah, I was talking to Nick, who is the local grower here that I buy from over at Gilbert's Dahlias, who I say stocks several of your varieties that you've bred. And he hybridizes, and he has a field where you can walk and you can look at the dahlias in flower, which is a lovely experience in the late summer months. So for me, who's incredibly motivated by color, form, and texture. And one of the reasons why I started my online accounts was get fed up of being misled with color, form, and texture on plants. So I started reviewing plants online in natural light. And so choosing, next year's plants for myself or next year's tubers when you can see them actually flowering and growing is lovely. And Nick was saying he's generating about 4,000 seedlings a year, and the ones that he's obviously whittling down to, he can't bear to throw out. So instead of throwing them out, he's trench planting them around the outside of his field. And I did ask him
Oh,
what he did.
that's cute.
Did he ever go back to any of them? Like, obviously, because obviously fashions change and emotions change. And when you look at a plant, sometimes it takes you in a different direction. He said, well, actually, several times I have walked around the outside of the field and thought, well, actually, you look a bit better than I thought you might be. And he's brought it back in. What do you do with? I mean, you said you just had about 10,000. You're bedding out, and over a period of years, you're whittling those down to sort of five. What are you doing with all the ones that are not making the cut?
Yeah, so the thing is, like, I only have a quarter of an acre, which isn't very much space to be doing
Goodness,
all my hybridized in.
goodness me! So you're growing 3,000 dahlias in half an acre.
Yep. Well, because when I plant my seedlings out, yeah, when I plant my seedlings out, so those I plant super close together. So those I
Yep.
can plant anywhere from 4 to 8 inches apart. So you can get quite a few. So a third of my whole quarter acre is this year 1,500 seedlings. So they're all planted about
And may,
six
and may,
inches
and may I
apart.
ask, that the reason for planting those so close together is, I mean, you're looking to get maybe one or two flowers off of those and see what the actual flower form and color comes out, and then you can move it to the next stage, which is obviously generating a tuber. Is that sort of right, the principle?
Yeah, that's basically the principle. So
Yep.
I kind of do it a little differently. I actually put my seedlings in what are called sink pots. So
Hmm.
I take a 4 inch pot and I sink it into the ground, and that has my little seedling already started in it. And then I have my drip tape that drips into that. So it gets watered, and then I just let it go. I don't pinch it off like you would normally pinch a dahlia so that you get branching and get lots and lots of blooms. I just let it go straight up to the first bloom, and I check that out. If I like it, I'll keep it going. If it's very poor to begin with, it usually gets pulled out right then. And what's easy about pulling out dahlias in 4 inch pots is the pot pops out of the ground, because normally with dahlia tubers planted that close, or dahlias planted that close, the tubers would intertwine with each other, and
Hmm.
so then it's intertwined with its neighbor, and it makes it really hard to remove it, especially later in the season as the tuber clumps get bigger.
Yeah,
And
you're
so I
obviously
like to, I
risking damage.
really,
Its neighbour might be nice.
yeah, or you spend a lot of your time keep cutting it back, even though, like cutting it back to ground level all season long. So what
Yeah.
I do is I pop them out, because they pop out really easily out of those 4 inch pots. And then basically what's left are the ones that we are keeping to observe for a second year. So out of the 1,000 last year that I grew, I kept 50. And
Hmm.
now I'm growing those 50 out this year. So those would be called second year seedlings. And then those second year seedlings are now going to be rowed down or whittled down, or culled down to about 5 or 6, maybe 7 of my favorites. So it's a long process, and we don't introduce our dahlias until we're sure that they're doing well and grow well. So the first year you only have one plant. The second year I plant 3 of each of them, and then by the third year I plant 5 to 10 of each, so that I can really see how they perform in the garden. And sometimes I actually plant 300 at my house, and so sometimes I plant some here at my house where my soil is a little more clay, and then the ones at the farm is more sandy. So I get to see how they grow in kind of different soil environments too.
Okay. I mean, I'm writing thinking I'm absolutely flabbergasted that you don't have a greenhouse either.
No, I use my living room as my greenhouse right now. I've got like 8 grow lights in there, and I have seed starting mats with temperatures gauges on them. It's like a 20 by 30 foot room
And
that gets
And
Yeah,
I've seen on Instagram. This is one of the most. This is you're gonna have to talk us through this process. You're actually stratifying your seeds on your cooker hob. Is that correct?
that is. Yeah, we have an old-fashioned stove, and it stays at just the perfect temperature, and that's where I sprout all my seeds. Yeah,
That's
it
amazing.
works because to set up a greenhouse takes up room, and that would be room I couldn't grow dahlias. If I
Yes,
did it
yeah.
at the farm. So and that way when I wake up in the morning, I can just go out there in my PJs and start working.
So how long? So how long do the seeds have to remain on the hob at a constant temperature to get them to germinate?
Yeah, so dahlia seeds germinate anywhere from 2 to 20 days, based at about like 75 degrees, 72 to 75 degrees. I'd say on average, the majority of seeds sprout day 5 to 7.
Hmm.
So I do get most of them, but I have had seeds go as long as 20 days. Um, so,
So that's you.
it does take a while.
That's you using the microwave or ordering out for those 20 days.
Yeah, it gets a little frustrating, I think, for my husband sometimes when he wants to cook. And, we just have to take them off the stove and then put them back on the stove. So
Oh,
there's a
so
bit of that.
okay, so they're not like, for instance, a an incubating chicken egg that's gonna not gonna like being taken off the heat for a moment. You can actually move them off the hob for half an hour or so and then put them back on again.
Yeah, and I've left them off. I've forgotten to put them back on for like overnight or something, and they're fine too. They're fine because temperatures out in nature would you know
Very, yes,
go
yeah,
up and down a bit.
yeah.
Yeah, so yeah,
So you
so
So obviously I mean, talking to you, and it's really lovely talking to people. I've talked to all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life on the podcast across many different plant groups. And every time I talk to somebody that's very, very passionate about a particular type of plant, you can always hear the charisma and the joy that this particular plant brings. Now, is your husband fully on board with the dahlias, or is he just have a passion for something else?
well, he's actually the one that kind of got me started on them because
Ah, so it's
we
his
had
fault.
a we had a yeah he got me going. We had two kids and they were getting to be like in high school age, like close to 17, 18, and they didn't really need my help much anymore. And so and he was running a bed and breakfast here in town, and he said, it'd be really great if we had flowers for the room.
Hmm.
And at the time, a friend of mine I used to grow vegetables, and a friend of mine at the time gave me some dahlia tubers from Costco, which is a big, I don't know if you guys have Costco, but it's a
We do
big,
indeed. Yes, yeah.
like, okay,
A
so
bulk
gave me some,
superstore. Yeah.
yeah, Superstore. She gave me some tubers from there, and I grew them, and I'm like, these are really beautiful. I just loved how fresh they looked and how big they grew, and the colors were amazing. And so I said, this might be something I could really get into. And I tend to jump into things big time anyway. So I'm like, okay, first year 60, then hundreds, and now thousands of dollars,
Well,
later. So
well, this is exactly why when you mentioned a second ago, do I show them? And I tentatively said no, because I can never ever do something slightly. I could never just enter a flower show with a few stems and just be happy that I'd entered and have the experience. If I do things like I have to. I have to do at my very best, and I have to win, and I have to reign supreme, and I have to have all of the best ones, and I have to. So, again, you probably look at my account and think, well, actually, I mean, it's all roses, and it's gone a bit crazy with roses. We're talking about nearly 350 varieties in the garden now.
wow.
I'm reviewing 65 different varieties this year alone. And yeah, it's because again, I can't do anything slightly. I have to go all or nothing, which is you sound very much
You
like
must
myself with that.
well, you must have a lot of room to do that. Do you have a nice big
We got a third of an
patch?
acre, so for UK plot size, it is large, but it isn't bigger. We've been looking at moving for some time. We've been looking at actually moving across to the New England states. we have been unsuccessful so far, and quite luckily at the moment with the political situation as it goes on over over in America. But we're staying still for a while. But the idea is we leave our little thatched cottage. We have a 17th century thatched cottage, which means it's got straw on the roof, and with a third of an acre. And we've been looking for something with more like about 2 to 5 acres. Because I need that kind of space to grow what I want to grow. So that's what our next stage is for us.
Yeah, because roses stay in the ground all the time. It's not like you're going to be removing them and starting again or taking too many of them out,
That's
probably,
one
I
one
would
of the problems. I
imagine.
mean, some of the ones that I do review don't make the cut. They actually get given away, or they do get pulled up and they have to be replaced. But the problem is, the more I review, and the breeding over here is getting so much better that the collection continues to grow, and the ones that I want to keep, the numbers go up and up and up. So yeah, we're
Yeah,
kind of
my
at.
husband was saying, like, does Ben hybridize uh, roses? And I said, I don't know. And I
No.
wouldn't be curious how that's even done.
Well, it's a very similar process to dahlias, actually. It's a very similar sort of, you pick the parents that you like the attributes of, the color or the fragrance, the form, the disease resistance, the vigor, the ferocity. You take all of those things from the parents and you cross them in a controlled environment, and you stratify the seed the next year. And again, I've spoken to backyard hybridizers. I don't know if you're familiar with the account here on Instagram. Jeff the Rose Dude. I spoke to him. He's over in Washington State. He's a home hybridizer, and I also had the pleasure in talking to Brad from Select Roses up in British Columbia. He's
Mm.
he's a rose hybridizer as well. But no, it's not something I've entered into as of yet. I'm staying away from it because again, I know I'll just get very, very obsessive and compulsive, and I won't be able to stop myself. So I'll stay, I think, in my lane for the time being.
Wow, what do rose seeds look like? I'm just curious.
Well, they're actually itchy. They're produced in hips. So they're produced in like a soft fruit, which has
Yeah.
an edible pith around the outside, which is actually quite tasty. You can make jams and jellies from the actual pith, but you have to remove the seeds. The seeds are I suppose that they look like a sesame seed, but they're slightly furry.
Okay.
So you shouldn't ingest them. A lot of them, they actually they're actually irritant if you eat them in that stage. But yes, that's what they look like. They look like a sesame seed, ever so slightly larger, and you remove them from the flesh, freeze them, and keep them in a cold environment before you then bring them on, like you would a dahlia with a constant temperature to get them to germinate.
So you dry them out and then germinate them when the season's just right.
Yeah, you pretty much don't dry them. You pop them in a fridge or a freezer. They've got to sort of have a period of stratification, which is cold,
I see.
to actually bring them into that growth cycle. And unbelievably, they actually germinate and grow and flower with a flower very, very quickly. In under about 3 months, they can actually be up and with a single bloom on the top of them for you to then be able to choose what you
Wow.
want to keep, and then grow on, and then which ones you want to sort of remove or and don't want to bother with. So the process is very, very similar to what we're producing. And the more people I talk to, I mean, Jeff the Rose Dude was, I think he had several thousands in his greenhouse. And David Austin Roses, who I've reviewed plenty of product for, they do 40,000 seedlings a year, then
Wow.
bring one variety to the market every year, but it takes 12 years to get that variety to be stable. So it's a big, big numbers game when I don't have anywhere near the space, so I'm staying away from that for just for now.
Wow. So do they store the seeds in the rose in the flower head, or you take them out?
Well, they get stored. They get removed from the rose hip, and then put
Yeah.
into cold storage, and then from there they're germinated on, sometimes on in bags on pieces of paper, much like your process of germinating dahlia seeds. And then once they've sort of germinated and they're actually starting to produce a taproot, they then go into compost from there.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah,
It,
that's so interesting.
it,
Yeah, I don't have room to keep any of my kind of seconds. I'm sure from year to year, I throw out some seedlings that might have been done better if I had seen, say 3 rounds of blooms. Sometimes the first bloom is wonkier than any of the other blooms that follow. So sometimes you have to be really patient and say, let's look at a second bloom before we throw this one out altogether.
Mhm. And you
But
talked to.
I don't have really room to keep them. But people have said, "Oh, I'll take your your seconds, but I really don't. I used to put them into the green waste system here, and they get composted basically.
Well, in some ways, I think that that probably explains why the dahlias that have come from you that I'm aware of have been of such great quality because they've got to be superior and they've got to be exquisite to actually make the cut.
Yeah. And so we have a really, quarter acre is not much room for us to, propagate our dahlias. So, and get them to people who want to buy them. So we work with a couple different, we actually work with two of our big suppliers, which is Stonehouse Dahlias, and then Microflower Farm does tubers and Stonehouse does cuttings.
Hmm.
And then we also have about 250 licensed sellers of our varieties. So last year we trademarked KAs,
Yeah.
which is my initials, and so now we have people who will help support our breeding program by giving us back a percentage of their sales so
Hmm.
that we can keep doing what we're doing, because basically our quarter acre farm is dedicated to hybridizing dahlias. Yes, we do sell a little bit to our florists and designers here in town, but the majority of the expense goes into hybridizing. And like we said, with roses and with dahlias, so much of them get rogued out or thrown out that, you have to grow them to a full plant to pretty much see that. So all the expenses and everything are there in it. So we've decided to, because we can't produce the amount of tubers that we would need to keep our farm, well supplied and all that, we decided to trademark so that we can get some of the a little bit of that back towards our breeding program. So we just got in the UK just this week. Let me see. It's Gager Estate. Do you know them?
No, I haven't heard of them, but
In,
I've.
they're near in Essex.
Hmm.
Yeah, so they're now a licensed seller of KA's varieties. So we're pretty excited. So we have licensees here in the United States, and then also in Canada, Europe, and the UK. So it's pretty exciting to get the varieties kind of out throughout the world
Yeah, and but
too.
for those listening, which varieties might they actually recognise that are you responsible for?
So anything with the KA in front of it, so KA apostrophe S are all mine. So that would be like Cinder Rose, which is a popular one that came out last year, Penny Lane, Pearl, Honeycomb, Rhubarb, Daybreak, Sunny Cove. Kay's Cloud has been around for probably the longest,
It's
and
an
that's been,
absolute favourite of mine. It's, I say, one of the ones that I've got here in the garden, and I adore it because it produces really big, showy flowers. I love the form. I love that spiky sort of look to it, and I love the sort of the pink tips it's yeah, it's a real firm favourite of mine here.
yeah, so that was one of the first. I was experimenting with hand pollinating, so that was introduced in 2015. So I had probably been growing it for 3 or 4 years prior to that. So that was
Hmm.
like 2011, and so I wasn't very good at hand pollinating at the time, and I got 3 seeds. That was it, 3 seeds from my whole summer. I just didn't know what I was doing with hand pollination. I mean, the bees do a great job, and I do a fair amount of open pollination and let the bees do the work, but I was trying out my hand pollination, and that was, I grew out those 3 seed, and one of those was Kay's Cloud. So it was kind of like beginner's luck, I would say, because that's been a really pretty one that, has kind of traveled the world too. It's out there. In different parts of the world already. So yeah, it's been in Europe for a while,
Yeah, and I
and
mean, for me, I mean, I've had to change my style of which what appeals to me a little bit because I'm very much focused on dinner plates. I mean, dinner plate dahlias really do that's what makes sparks my imagination, and that you can only get 4 or 5 of those in a vase or a bunch before before you can't get any more in them.
yeah,
And I grow so many. I mean, I haven't anywhere near as many as you. I've probably got about 70 to 100 varieties in the ground, which obviously produce far too many blooms for me for one household. So I like to give them away to family and friends, and I have a little stand that I put outside the front of our cottage. And I put them out there for free, bunched up. I love going. No, I love nothing more than going out into the garden at sort of 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, early, and see what's open. And I pick dozens and dozens of bunches, and I bundle them up, and I put them outside the house. And I love walking around the little place. We live in a fairly small town called Fordingbridge on the outskirts of the New Forest, and I walk around the town with the dog, and I see my bunches of dahlias in people's windows, and that
Oh,
gives me the most amount of joy ever. And I often see, gentlemen coming home on their way home from work, and they'll pull into the parking bay at the front of the house. They'll jump out the car. They'll grab a bunch of flowers from the stall. Obviously they're free, and you can see the relief on their face because they've obviously done something wrong, or they're late. Or they have forgotten to pick up something for tea, and they just this relief on their faces as they pick up a bunch of flowers and take them home to someone special. It's just lovely for me. And yeah, the dahlia for me represents a huge amount of joy, and I do love roses, but the sheer opulence and the volume of flowers that you can get from dahlias, there's nothing better for it. There really isn't.
yeah, we call it spreading the dahlia love because we do that too a lot. And even our Dahlia Society, right before we have our show, we put out free bouquets all around town, like at the bus station or at the coffee shop. And it's pretty exciting. And then some people email us back, it made my day, or my mother was sick and this really made her day. And so it's very sweet to give flowers to people. Do you grow Aggie White? Because that's one of my favorites from the UK,
No, no, it's
and
not.
it's a
I
giant.
I must confess that I struggle with strong basic colors. So yeah, it's not white wouldn't normally be something that would show up on my color palette. So no, it's not a
Oh,
variety
okay.
I'm familiar with. I tend to like my
Yeah,
soft
and see,
pastels and pale pinks and yellows. That kind of thing is more my wheelhouse. So
oh yeah, it's more of a bronzy, but it's a giant one and it grows beautifully. I
oh,
got it. I got it from Halls of Hedon,
uh-huh, yeah.
which is a supplier in the UK when they were shipping to the US years back, and it's been a favorite of mine. And but I have a big one that you would probably like to grow called Kay's Khaleesi,
Hmm.
named after the queen in Game of Thrones. I
Yes,
let
yeah.
my son name it. And it's a giant of giants. It's the double A here in the U.S., which is, gets to be 12 inches to 16 inches, like giant.
Wow,
And it's informal too. And it's white, so it'd work in your color palette.
oh, that sounds very much a bit of me. Yeah, sounds lovely. So I was just going to
Maybe
ask
it'll get there.
you've touched on the subject very briefly there. You let your son name that particular one. How do you come up with the names? Because some of the names you were listing in the KA series a second ago were lovely. Are you taking your inspiration from the flower itself or something else?
Yeah, usually from the flower itself. I mean, a few are named after people. Like there's one called Grandma Sib, which is named after my mom, and Papa John, which is named after my dad. But usually it's a group of us. So there's about four of us that work at the farm together, and we'll like look at a bloom and we're saying, okay, this one needs a name now. Okay, everybody come up with the name. And Debbie, who works for us, came up with Cinder Rose, which was perfect for that particular one. And sometimes they're named after the color, like we have one called Guava, and so it's sort of the color of a guava.
Hmm.
And sometimes my husband will make a list of ones, names that he thinks would be good, and so we'll look at a bloom and give it a name. So it usually doesn't get a name until like year 2 or sometimes year 3, and before that, it's a number because I keep a spreadsheet of everything that gets crossed and how well it's doing, keeping notes on it. But and sometimes I ask on Instagram too. I have an Instagram account under Santa Cruz Dahlias, and sometimes I'll just ask people, "Do you guys can you
You,
help me
you're
name this
you're
one? We're
very
kind of struggling."
you're very modest. It's not just an Instagram account. It's a very large and substantial Instagram account with a massive following.
Well, I mean, people are so nice, and then they follow you, and it's really nice. I enjoy my Instagram account because a lot of it's about education, and so like this week in the garden, what did I do? I got on and talked about checking your dahlia tubers, like slowly digging them out if everybody else is up around them, if all the other tubers are sprouting around them, and there's still one that's not, because dahlias can, the tuber itself can have some rot in it that you can't really see, or, in our area, a gopher could have taken it down and things like that. So, it's good to check your dahlias this time of the year, here for us, because most people's are already in the ground. Most growers are already have their dahlias in the ground, and then they're pushing a good sprout by now. So,
Yeah.
some varieties are slow to sprout, but
I have a problem. You don't have them over where you grow, but I have a problem with moles here. Are you familiar with what a mole is?
oh yeah, we have
Yeah.
moles
Oh,
too.
you have
Yep,
moles. Okay. I have
yep.
and I take it as a compliment that my soil is very, very good and full of worms and very moist and rich and fertile, which means the mole family that rampage about my garden have everything they need. But I can guarantee that if a daily doesn't overwinter properly, that it hasn't overwintered because it's rotted, or it hasn't overwintered because it was a poor quality tuber. It's the fact that the mole has got round it and has disturbed it, and then the rot has set in after that. So the ones that aren't showing any signs of life, as I say, in the next probably in the next 14 days, I'll do exactly what you were describing. Then I'll very, very gingerly start digging them out if they're not showing signs of life. And quite often, if you don't go very, very gently, you can damage them, and then they don't survive. But yeah, there are a few this
Yeah.
year I'm looking at in the collection. I think, oh, I think Mr. or Mrs. Mole has been near that one. I think I might have lost that one.
Yeah, it's hard moles because they make these big airy tunnels right around the tubers, and tubers can't grow in air. They need soil around them, and that can be a problem. Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't have moles. We do have moles, but gophers are more of a problem here. Like yesterday, I had to trap a gopher. Actually, my brother came over and helped me trap gophers yesterday. So we set some traps, and we were sitting around talking, and one went off, and we caught a gopher, and it was pretty amazing. Like within 5 minutes of setting the trap. But
Uh,
a lot of people don't like to trap gophers, so it's kind of an issue. But if you don't like to trap gophers, you can do those sink pots, but sink a big thick plastic pot into the ground
yeah.
and fill it with potting soil, and that way the gophers tend to not chew through a plastic pot, although I have had them do that from time to time, but generally they don't do that, and it's a good way to kind of protect your tubers if you have a big gopher problem
I I've
and
seen
you don't want to trap.
I've seen several rose growers actually they plant in gopher cages, which was a completely new concept to me. I mean, I had to have a bit of a Google and a bit of an education on it, but that seems like an amazing thing. They bury a basket in the ground and then obviously fill it back in and then plant their very precious roses in the basket to stop them being chewed and unearthed.
Yeah, and people do that with dahlia tubers too. And early on I used to use those gopher cages too. But the problem is the tubers grow through the cages, and then when it's time to dig them out and take them out, they're all entwined in the wire, and
Yeah.
it's just a big mess, really, in my opinion.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm very glad. I'll keep my moles, and you can keep your gophers.
Yeah, moles are better than gophers, I would say, because what I tend to do if I notice there's a mole in the area, I just smash the tunnel down so that there's not that air around the tuber, and that
Yeah.
really helps. You just take your foot or your fist and just push it down, and
Just
so that helps. Yeah,
recompact the
but
soil.
once the gopher's eaten your tuber, then it's it can be the end of it, and it's frustrating if it's a seedling or a second year seedling when you only have 3 plants and you can't ask a friend for a replacement or anything like that. Yeah.
So just very briefly, when you're walking through your dahlia seedlings, what kind of attributes are you looking for in a new variety? Obviously, we spoke about color and the fact that you've got some local florists that come and have a look at helping you choose. But what really appeals to you? Is it form? Is it color? Is it size?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. So first off, what I do during the winter is I set my hybridizing goals. So I have goals. So if, say, for example, I always am hybridizing for giants like you like. I love the giant dahlias too. And
Yeah.
so I always, every year, hybridize for those. So I'll cross, Kay's Cloud with Aggie White, for example. Take pollen from Aggie White and put it onto Kay's Cloud and see, like, ooh, what do their babies look like? What do those seeds, what will they produce? And then I keep track on a spreadsheet. So every year I'm always hybridizing for giants. So that's sort of a given.
Yeah.
but other years I'm hybridizing for different things. So for many years I was hybridizing um, for different forms. So I was fine with informal or formal decoratives in blushes and whites and creams. So I did that for quite a while. Now I'm hybridizing in color for a brown. I would like to get a brown like the Coco Loco rose. That color
Yes.
would be
Yeah.
beautiful in a dahlia.
Yeah.
I've been doing it for about 4 years and haven't been successful yet to get a color like that.
I
But
mean, it must
I'm
be,
working on.
it must that sort of coffee cream must really appeal to the American market because, like I say, that Coco Loco color is incredibly popular with rose societies that I'm aware of throughout the states. And a rose that I actually did a personal review today is known by a different name over in the states. And again, it picks up that sort of that color that you described. So it must be a very, very American passion, that color.
Yeah, I think because it does blend well with lots of different palettes,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
you can put a peach with it or a cream.
Or a pale
Whites
pink,
look
yeah.
good, and then it looks really pretty with people's skin, like for wedding bouquets and things like
Yes, yeah,
that.
indeed. I
So
think, yeah,
I
you
made
might
it.
knock the nail on the head there, haven't you?
Yeah, so some years I've done that, but this year what I'm hybridizing for are for mini balls. So those
Hmm.
are the ones that are kind of between palms and balls. So it's
Yeah.
kind of an in between size. I'm looking for that size but in multiple colors. And the colors would be kind of soft muted, complex colors. So not just straight colors, which are really great too, like Jomanda. I love Jomanda, that color. It's very pure, like an orangey color. It looks beautiful, and it's great for weddings. And when people call for a peach palette or a coral palette, it works perfect in there. But I think we need. I'm trying to get more mini balls that are in multiple colors, and I'm also trying for one that is in that kind of mocha cream, dark cream color too. So I've been working on that for multiple years. And then this year last year I did palms, the little tiny palms, and those
Yeah.
are very difficult to hybridize
I can
because
imagine they
they
are.
have, yeah, their petal count is so intense. You know how tight it is,
Yeah.
that the petals have pushed out all the seed producing area in the middle. And a lot of times there's only the two seeds and pollinating, and you only have the potential for two seed. And it's hard to get that just right, and a lot of times they're just not that viable, even the seeds, and it's just difficult. So one year I tried hand pollinating, and I got 20 seed for all my work. I mean, sometimes I'm spending 3 hours a day out there hand pollinating, and I didn't get enough seed to really make it worth my time. And so last year I did open pollination. I let the bees do it. So I planted all my palms all in a row, so that the bees, when they're flying, they'll go from one to the other and kind of down the line. And so I got a lot better in the amount of seeds. So I'm planting those out this year. And palms tend to produce mini balls. A lot of times when you hybridize, either it goes smaller or bigger, but I've noticed with palms that it tends to go a little bit bigger in
Hmm.
size. So since I'm trying for mini balls, so that's a hybridizing kind of something that I'm working on when I'm hybridizing. So I'm working on that. I'm also trying to get more informal decorative. So informal decorative dahlia are ones where the petals twist and turn a little more. They're not so formal like a
Yes. Yeah.
ball or a formal decorative where
Yeah.
everything marches back just
Something,
perfectly. So
something along the line of octopus sparkle. If anybody needs something like
yeah, something like that. I don't know that variety, but it sounds really pretty.
that.
Is that a variety or
Yeah, yeah,
that you
that's
guys
the
have in
yeah,
the
yeah,
UK?
that's one that I've added to my collection this year, which is a very open form, and the petals not only peel back, but they also twist at the same time. So it bobs around in the wind nicely. So yeah, that's a particularly nice one.
Yeah, so here in the U.S. there are very few informal decoratives in the smaller size. Like, you can get it in the giants. A lot of the giants are informal, twist and turn, like
Mhm.
Nick Senior. I don't know. Maybe you could list some of the ones that are giant that are
Probably
in
something
like in.
like probably something like Great Hercules. I think that one would class that way as well because the petals go backwards and twist as they go back.
Yeah. So I'm trying to get that, but in the small size because Jan, who I work with at the farm, she's an amazing colorist. She's my really good friend and been helping me at the farm for, I think like 13 years. And she's the one that can put color together like nobody else that I know.
Yeah.
She's got that really amazing, trick to doing that, or she's just so good. Anyway, she helps me a lot with color, and we realized that, and also, in a bouquet, you want movement. Sometimes it's good to have static, like the formal decoratives, but a lot of times it's nice to have that movement that informal decoratives give you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we're working this year on informal decoratives, and in the miniature, in the smaller size. So in our classification book, in our show book, there's very few listed that are miniature informal decoratives, and so they need it for show, but the florists and designers, I think, would really appreciate it if we could get something smaller, because those giants are really hard to work with.
Yes. Yeah.
My florist's like, yeah, give me 3 of them because they're eye candy to anybody who walks through the door. People are like, oh my gosh, can a flower really grow that big? And, dahlias are really amazing in that they can grow that large. And so they like a few of them, but it's not like give me 12 of those or give me 20 of those. They're kind of difficult to work with, except for in those big arches,
Yeah.
the wedding arches.
Yeah.
People, they do like them for those, but I personally don't sell that many, but I'm like you, I love growing them. It's always something I have in my garden and always something I'm hybridizing for new ones. So Aggie White, which is not white, but bronze, but it's called Aggie White. And that's the one that came from the UK that I brought in last year, exported for me, which means sometimes dahlias have genes that change. And
Mhm.
so one of the laterals put out a highlighter yellow Aggie White, which, it was changed color completely, but it's exactly the same size and form. So it was kind of fun, but it's not a color that I appreciate, but it'd be perfect for the show flowers,
Okay.
so I'm going to be showing that one. But it's not one that's not my color palette, that really bright yellow.
And
So.
just briefly before we wrap up our conversation today, have you got any advice for anybody that's looking to get into growing dahlias? Doesn't matter so much about hybridizing dahlias, but starting their journey into the world of dahlias. Have you got any tips that you can give people that are just starting out?
Well, I would just jump into it, and probably if it was me, I wouldn't buy any of the unicorn dahlias to start out with because they're usually expensive.
So stay. So
But I would go with, maybe ask someone who has been growing dahlias which dahlias are easiest to grow. So just so you're successful right off the bat. So that's what I would do, and then I would work on my soil. I mean, I think soil is super, super important. So, I mean, if you have a plot that you've been amending your soil year after year, that would be a great place to put your dahlias. And you need to have at least 6 hours of sun too. So don't plant them, like under a tree. I really enjoyed planting cover crops each winter. I don't know if your weather's such that you can grow good cover crops in the
yes,
UK,
yeah,
can
yeah.
you?
I actually cover my dahlia beds quite often in a cover crop just to fix the nitrogen and just stop the soil erosion for the winter.
Yeah, so that's a great way to also keep the weeds down, feed the biology in the soil, and then it adds all this organic matter to because you weed whack it down, and then what we do is we tarp it with a like a tarp so that the sun can't get through, and it basically kills the cover crop. But in the meantime, it's fed all that biology so that when you plant right into it, it's just the perfect soil for you. So I would if I was starting out again, I wouldn't till. I would do no till and just do a cover crop and plant right into it. If it sometimes takes a while to build that organic matter in your soil, so you might need to fertilize more often in the first few years. I would probably do a fish emulsion.
Yes.
I like to do things more organically myself, so I would do that. But I would tell them just to jump in. But I would some varieties are like a lot stronger and a lot easier to grow. So, you may want to check with people in your area that know which ones are the best for that.
Yeah. Some really helpful hints there. Thank you very much. It's been
Yeah,
an absolute pleasure to talk to you and get to know you a little bit more. I can really hear the passion for dahlias pour through you, and which it explains why the ones that are coming out of your breeding program are as exquisite as they are. I can't thank you enough for your time today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I will
it's been so fun.
I'll catch up with you
It's been
again
so
very,
fun. Thank you.
not a problem. I'll talk to you again very soon. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
As you heard during our conversation, Kristine and her husband are really committed to dahlia breeding and have bred some exquisite dahlias which have already made their way to the shores here on the UK, one of which makes up my favourite dahlia, which is called Kaz Cloud, an absolutely stunning dinner plate variety. I'm also going to be looking out for the varieties Kristine mentioned that I should look for and hopefully add them to my collection for 2026. Please do head over to her Instagram profile now, which is Santa Cruz Dahlias, and make sure that you show her account some love. Just yesterday, something very exciting happened here in the North Lodge Cottage garden, and unfortunately had to be rescheduled because of the weather earlier on in the week. But the very first photo shoot took place for my new book, which I'm going to be writing and compiling over the winter months. I've got half a dozen sessions booked with a photographer over the next few weeks, and we're going to be taking just as many pictures of the garden as possible as it produces its wave upon wave of colour and flower over the next couple of months. I've then personally pledged to make sure that I sit down over the winter months and actually put myself into a position where I can actually write the text to go with the photos that are being taken. So I hope you hold me accountable for that promise. Off the back of our visit to the Peterbills Garden Centre and the Peterbills Show Garden, the podcast next week is featuring Matt from Peterbills, and we're going to be talking everything roses on our chat next week. So I hope you join us for that particular conversation, and until then, happy gardening.